Boo-doo-boo-boo. Welcome to From the Ground Up podcast. Surprise! You gotta wait and you gotta mute that when that comes up. We're so on top of it today.
How I do podcast.
Listen, we've missed that the last like 4 times.
I'm not usually over here. Who controls the mouse?
You're in controls
Who's
here.
The mouse controller? Thank you. Great intro, guys. Surprise.
That's a pretty classic intro, actually. Welcome to From the Ground Up podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here. Theportcitypythons.com, Theportcitypythons on Instagram, all that good stuff. I'm not going to bore you with all these things, but Southeast Carpet Fest, the auction is up now, so go bid on some items. You can buy one of his vouchers.
I was going to say, yeah, I have a $300 voucher on there. Last I checked, it was at $145, so hopefully that climbs up there. I think, what is it, NIDO research is what proceeds are going towards.
Yep, and it's going to all different universities, so they're spreading the love, and you get like half off a snake pretty much at that point.
Yeah, hopefully I have some nice stuff this year too. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and if you're not into short tails and bloods and all that good stuff, there's plenty of other things out there for you. But
Graham, already?
Oh no. So yeah, it seems like the blood python short tail group really comes out as far as like you guys are more so of a community of.
I've kept a lot of species. I've worked with a lot of species. It's definitely the most community oriented. It's the most like fun group of people. And I'm not saying there's not fun people in other groups, but it's just really limited drama. Like, you keeping ball pythons, boas, retics, like there's always drama. There's very little in short tails. The people are more supportive, I find too. Like it's not a competition. Everybody's like, I want you to produce nicer stuff. I know at one point I had some Borneo projects I was planning, and like Kara gave me a really great deal on the Borneo that ended up being like the founder of most of my stuff, because she told me I needed to step my game up. She's like, whatever. So she gave me this deal, and basically, I wouldn't have the Borneos I have now if she hadn't offered me that. And that wasn't even something she was like, just said, you need this. It wasn't something I was pursuing, but it changed everything for that game for me. So definitely cool community to be a part of.
Wow. So, most people don't start off with Borneos and short tail or Borneo short tail pythons, blood pythons, Sumatrans. So what was your first reptile and how did you kind of get into it?
So I grew up terrified of snakes, like horrendously so, crippling fear. Could not be in the same room as them, which is kind of weird now because like my house is full of them.
Yeah, you can't escape them.
No, pretty much my kitchen doesn't have snakes in the bathroom. That's it, at least that I know of. And so I actually, I used to work nights at Denny's of all places, and I had trouble sleeping during the day. So I was trying to find something just to kind of kill time. So a friend of mine recommended I go do some deliveries for a friend of hers. And she owned a flower shop. So I went over there and started doing deliveries for that. Well, at the time, she was also running a reptile rescue. So she had a lot of, snakes, lizards, monitors, all that kind of stuff. So many iguanas, which are still something that I'm terrified of to a certain degree. Horrible.
Dude, an adult male iguana is like nothing to mess with.
No, they're horrible.
The tail is so terrible.
Yep. Like
that's the worst feeling.
And they had a room over there that was basically like, let's say 15 by 15 room where it was just a big tree built into it. And there was just like 20 iguanas that lived in there. And it was like the scariest place to go into because they would all like stop and stare at you and start whipping tails. And you're like in there, like, trying to dive bomb. So that was interesting. But anyhow, there were kid volunteers there and stuff like that. And I was watching like these 5-year-old kids walking around holding snakes. And like, I just felt I can't be afraid of something that these little kids are just walking around with. Like, I have to get over it. So for me, I always like to have knowledge of stuff. And I feel like knowledge eases a lot of fear. So I started just picking the brain of the people there, asking a lot of questions, just observing. And actually the first day that I really handled snakes, I was by myself. I had asked permission and I said, do you mind if I take some stuff out? I'll be responsible for it, whatever. And I went through, and every snake that wasn't something that was like lethal to me, not that they had venomous, but just like there was a big African rock there. There was, large Burmese pythons, things along that. But pretty much everything 6 feet and under, I took every single snake out that day. And I just said, I'm getting over this and this is how I'm going to do it. And I didn't get bit by anything. And I was like, well, I've been so afraid of these animals, and I just handled maybe 40 or 50 snakes on my first day and nothing happened. And so I just got more and more curious. I started working there, and I definitely think that kind of helped me grow into the hobby in a different way than a lot of people, because I started out from a rescue perspective as opposed to a breeding perspective. So I think that's why I'm so into, screening buyers and doing all that, because I've seen the dark side of what happens to these animals when they're not cared for properly. It also helped me learn a lot of like medical knowledge and things like that, so I can treat a lot of stuff. So from the beginning, I didn't have to kind of make those mistakes and learn how to fix them. I already knew that going into keeping. From there, I just started keeping snakes there. Like I had a few snakes that were mine, like one that came in as a rescue.
Any species in particular?
The first one that I really had was actually a Burmese python. Not that I recommend that, but that's the first one.
Anyway.
She was small, but she was a rescue, and she ended up passing. She didn't make it. And then I had, which people are going to find really ironic, I had a Sumatran blood cross, and that was my first short tail. And for somebody that's so anti-hybrid, that was the first short tail that I had. I was up at a place, if anybody remembers, called Regal Reptiles in Rhode Island, and they had this subadult, short tail cross in there, and he was in way too small of a space, and it like bothered me. So I did the, Petco, I rescued it type thing when you paid $200 for it. I named him Sumo, and that was my first short tail. And he was not the healthiest of animals, and there was a lot of issues. Part of that was probably my husbandry at that point, because, I was still doing the tank thing and thinking that was the way to go.
Being a hybrid, at least it's probably not imported.
Right. Yeah, he was calm as could be. I mean, and I made every dumb mistake that, kids make when you get into these animals. Like he used to sit in my lap in the car when we went places and like all that kind of stuff.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah. Like he was totally chill. But definitely not something I should have been doing. But, I was like 18 then or whatever, and thought it was like cool. And I was that stupid person that we all yell at now, and not yell to be hypocritical, but we made those mistakes, and, ultimately that snake passed. But it definitely inspired me to learn more about them. And then I started off with like a pair of Borneos that I bought as babies. And I actually got out of snakes for a while in like 2008. So everything that I had then, I sold the whole collection to someone. I took a few years off. I was still doing rescue work.
Was
so
there
I
any
always had
reason in
stuff.
particular?
I lost this big female African rock python that was very near and dear to my heart. Actually, she's right there. And it was really, really devastating. She got out of her enclosure. She was actually in a large vision, and she popped the doors. They were locked, but she popped the whole assembly out of the cage.
Wow.
And she got out, and she was gravid at the time in the early stages of that. And somehow my dog got into the room. She actually grabbed a hold of the dog. I wasn't home.
Whoa.
And she was about 135 pounds. The dog was about 75. And my roommate's girlfriend was home, and she got the neighbor, and the neighbor ended up like cutting her throat and stabbing her to get her off. And I had to take her and have her euthanized. She was still alive.
Oh my God.
And so that just really, really bothered me. And I really went through a very dark period. Personally, I quit my job. I moved out of that house. I couldn't even live there anymore because just the memory associated with that. And so I decided to sell my collection because I felt like I wasn't in a mental state to take care of them.
I don't think anyone was ready for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hardcore.
Did the dog survive?
Yeah, he's actually the one that just passed last January, but this happened in 2008. So
any superficial damage to the animal or to
the
dog?
The dog, his eye, she got sort of got him in the eye, not in the eyeball, but like the socket. So his eye sat a little bit funny. But other than antibiotics, the vet didn't have to do anything to him. But there was too much damage to her. And it was such a struggle because the local, this was at nighttime. So the local, emergency vets wouldn't even see her. They were too afraid. And I was like, she's super fine.
And it's an African rock python. Like they're not known for being.
No, but she was
animal.
like super amazing. She was probably to this day the nicest animal I've ever worked with. Which I know people are not going to believe, but seriously,
but it's like a once in a lifetime animal.
Yeah, bomb proof. I mean, and being an early on keeper, then I'd only kept for several years. Like that snake taught me a lot, and she let go of a lot of mistakes. I mean, there were times where she could have had me dead to rights if she wanted to, and she just wasn't that way. She really didn't even have a big food response. She was pretty patient for food. Like everything was great. You could open her cage. She'd come right out, hang out. You could touch her, do whatever you want, pick her up. She was hard to maneuver because she's 135 pounds. But yeah, she was just shy of 17 feet. She was a monster, but not in personality at all.
But you were kind of a big python guy right from the beginning.
Yeah,
you were like,
always.
let's get some big pythons.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like the short tails. I don't consider a big snake. They have a big snake feel and personality, but they're really not in a huge package. African rocks are definitely my favorite species. There's no question about that. That's my hands down favorite species to work with, and I think their reputation is deserved and undeserved. They're very intelligent from my perspective in working with them. I've never had one mistake me for food ever. I've had them want to kick my butt, but because they wanted to kick my butt, not because they were confused. And I've found they're very visually observant. And in raising them, I've always kept them, like everyone that I've raised, I've kept in my kitchen for the first like 6 months. So it's a room that I'm in every day, but that I'm not constantly in. So they watch my maneuvers. They watch me move. I also will wear like an old shirt around the house. I train them to that. So I'll put that in their enclosure once they're settled in. And so that smell becomes associated with where they're comfortable. And that seemed to work really well for me.
Wait, you put your shirt in there?
Yep. So I'll wear a shirt I don't care about around the
Never
house.
heard of that
Yeah.
before.
So you center them. So now when you're going in, they're used to seeing you. So the visual stimuli, you're not really getting them. They're used to that smell, and that smells comfortable to them. So that's not a change. So it just kind of limits the number of things that are going to kind of churn that up, and they're smart enough to figure it out. And I've kept them since like 2004. And at one point I had a lot of them, and I've been bitten once ever by an African rock. And it was a captive bred. I had imports like straight out that were great. And it was a captive bred baby, and he was in shed, and he bit me, and he really went at it. You know, he was a little hatchling, but he did not want to let go. But yeah, I mean, I've taken in adults that were supposedly mean. I just leave them alone for a few months other than cleaning. And then, you know, some snakes, the smarter ones, they eventually get curious about you to some level. And so you can kind of work that angle. And that's what I found works with them. And I also found that going into their space is where you get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I always let my rocks come out to me, and then they're fine. But if I violate that code and I reach in, they'll get agitated, and they don't necessarily bite, but they'll coil around really tight, and they're strong. So I'm not advocating that they're great snakes for, you know, the average hobbyist. I think they're wonderful snakes for people that are really dedicated. But the problem is most of the people that would be good homes for them don't want them because of the reputation and because of how they can be.
And when you keep most of the people that would maybe into them or keep them correctly maybe have a lot of different animals, and maybe that's a handful.
It's a lot of space, and it's not something you're going to want to handle by yourself. I remember that gentleman passed away over in Europe, I think, and it was an African rock that killed him, and it was like an 8-footer, and everybody on the internet, of course, like, oh, an 8-foot rock can't kill somebody. Yeah. Yes, they can. I promise you. That snake is so strong. It's incredible how strong they are. And owning them, like, you just get an appreciation.
He was framed by PETA. What are you talking about?
You know, and it's everybody forgets that it takes a matter of seconds in the right pressure for you to be passed out.
Yes. Yeah. Literally, if you cut off blood supply, so like a rear naked choke, you can cut off blood supply. It's less than 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's like, imagine if I can do that with my arms.
Right. Here's this animal that's just built to do that. Yeah. And
you
people,
got no blood going to your brain.
No. And everybody thinks they're super strong and this and that. But, you know, especially a spook snake is the one that's the most dangerous to you. You know, everybody worries about the food response, and that's one thing. But it's when they get scared that they really, you know, they're not in their right mind. Just like when we get scared, you know, we don't always make the best decisions. They will panic, and that's when you get into trouble, and they have a lot of power on tap. I definitely have a lot of respect. I mean, I've kept olive pythons, which I have now. I've kept berms, retics. You know, I've been around scrubs. I think rock pythons are the strongest snake that I've ever interacted with. It's just a totally different level. And I remember having 2 equally sized, you know, a rock male and a berm male, same girth, same length. The rock male was like 15 pounds heavier. just because it's just so much solid. It's just a different animal. Berms are kind of flabby-ish, even when you keep them right. But rocks are they're like that boa build where it's just real strength. But the reason that I don't work with them as far as breeding goes is A, there's so many legal restraints, and B, I just don't feel comfortable selling something that deadly to the average keeper. Like, I screen hard now for Bloods and Shorttails. You would not want to see what I would put you through if I was doing African rocks. So Bloods and Shorttails are one of my favorite species, but I figured that if I was going to get into something and invest some money into it, that was a safer investment for me, was something that's not on the horizon right now, at least for the legal landscape, and that I can feel comfortable selling to a new keeper, that I can talk them through raising that animal and that they can be prepared for it. And they still are very, very strong animals, and an adult can definitely give you a run for your money, but it's not something that's going to be deadly unless you make a really, really stupid mistake.
Yeah. Was there any reason why you went from like keeper to breeder? Is any particular thing that you were looking for as far as like, what made you start breeding?
Well, the person that I learned from immediately after starting the rescue thing, he bred. And so I kind of watched the process there and watched the hatching process. And it is really super cool to like see babies come out. And even now, after breeding for a while, like, I have a couple of videos where you watch babies just pip and take their first like breath. And it's just one of those things to me that, like, every time you see that, it's like the coolest experience ever. And so I don't want to say I got addicted to that, but I definitely like really enjoy that part of the process. And that really makes all the work that goes into it totally worth it when you see that. And like, here's this life that like may not have existed if you weren't involved in the process. And I don't want to be like God complex, like I made this, because the snakes make them. We just
But you love snakes, so multiplying snakes sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
It sounds like fun.
So I enjoy that aspect of it. I also, like, I'm not a super people person, but I enjoy seeing other people enjoy animals, especially animals that I produce. Like, that's a really cool thing to see it be somebody's favorite snake in their collection, or see it be, something that they can hand to their kids and their kids are enjoying, like that definitely, is also something that I really like. So I kind of think watching that process and stuff. And this was before, like, when I got into wanting to breed was before like I sold my collection there the first time. So at that time I had some really cool stuff that I wish I still had. Like, I had Ceylonese pythons and like cool stuff that like now is harder to come by. I had a pair of those. I had a bunch of water pythons back then too, which I've just always been one of my favorite species. I had, expert at assembling snake racks. My ARS rack definitely kicked my ass. And it's still assembled wrong on like 7 levels, but I have no desire to take it apart and re-put it back together.
And Dan's referring to, it seems like there's been a couple people who just like to mess with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the chat's just been like fucking with you, and I feel like you've done a good job of not getting distracted. But this one was like highlighted in blue because Kyle clearly wanted you to see it.
Yeah. So I definitely like that aspect. I just lost what we were talking about because he threw me off.
I think it's something to where we don't necessarily bond with people very well, but clearly we have formed a lot of bonds through snakes. Like most of the people that I do like is because of our love of snakes, and that's a weird thing.
I spend like so little time with my friends from like before snakes now. Like, I travel for this stuff like this. I'll go visit people's collections. I'll go to Tinley. I'll go to whatever. And then people are like, you want to go to Block Island? I'm like, no, I'm good. No interest in that at all. It's sunny and hot, and I spend enough time in my hot, humid rooms. I'm good.
Right.
But it is weird like that. I still have obviously friends from growing up, but I definitely don't interact with them as much as I do like the reptile people. And it's weird too, because some of the worst people I've met are in the hobby too. Like, it definitely encompasses everything. And some people make you want to bang your head off of a wall, and you see some people, and it's super frustrating to have some knowledge that you're trying to share with people, and they just don't want to accept it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not even trying to help you. I'm trying to help your animal. And I don't want to say it to sound harsh, but like, I don't care about you. I don't know you, but I care about that animal that I don't know, And that's just who I've always been, even as a kid. Like, I was not a video game person. I was always in like the animal section of the library, reading everything that I could read. I always watched like Attenborough and all that stuff growing up. That was like my life. Reptiles were always of interest. Like, I watched a lot of Steve Irwin and the Crocodile Hunter, like everybody else did from our like generation. And that definitely, I think, opened the door to where I got to with snakes. I don't think, had I not seen that kind of content and that kind of passion for those animals, that I would have ever been able to kind of get over that hump. I'm still terrified of spiders. That's going to be a really tough one. The person that gets me over that, I'll have to come up with a prize, because I don't think that's going to ever happen.
Maybe one day, Melissa.
I would hold that person in my life. Just because I held one does not.
See, the weird thing is, I would hold a tarantula. That does not scare me as much as like a wolf spider. Yeah, those like jumping spiders. I'm terrified. I actually gave away a sectional sofa once because a spider got into it and I didn't know where it was, and I felt like I could never sit on it again.
Oh, I love that.
So I told the people if they came and got it that day, it was theirs. And I got it out of my house. I mean, I am terribly afraid of spiders. I have gone so far as, if there's one in the house, I've wedged towels underneath my bedroom door when I go to bed. I left the hall light on, thinking the light would deter them, like, you know, like some kind of Lord of the Rings thing, like the light's going to keep it away. So you don't, I'm bad.
So do you subscribe to that fact that you always hear that, like, I don't think it's a fact that people say you eat like so ever many spiders during the night.
Yeah,
while you sleep.
I've read things that say it's a fact, and I've read things that say it's a total myth. I'm going to operate under it's a myth, because that's what I need to do to survive. Otherwise, I'm going to start sleeping with like a respirator on.
Your mouth shut.
The scariest spider story I ever heard was from somebody local to me. We were out for like 4th of July on a boat watching fireworks. Somehow got onto the conversation of my snakes, which always happens because somebody was like, he has snakes. Then everybody wants to know.
Like a little tinge of
and then next thing you know, here I come, you know, like the Kool-Aid man, you're going to learn everything. And then, you know, we get into the irony of everybody picks on me because I'll handle any snake, but I'm terrified of spiders. And so this lady told me how she was on like a CPAP machine, and she had went grocery shopping, and she kept her mask in her purse in the carriage. She bought bananas. Spider went from the banana into the machine. Well, she went home and hooked up her machine, and the spider went up. Yeah, it went up into her nasal cavity and like started burrowing out of the side of her face.
Oh my God.
And it was a brown recluse, so it was really bad. And she ended up with like all kinds of problems and sinus surgeries and all this stuff. And like that, it's like, I'm not on that machine, but that's my greatest fear. Like, if you wanted to torture me, lock me in a room with that, knowing that's in there, and that's all you have to do. Like, I'm all done. Yeah, she told me that, and I was like, oh, I'm like, first of all, and now like having my wisdom teeth out, like bananas are one of the foods I'm allowed to eat. So I had to buy bananas, and I was like so freaked out, like checking the whole thing still. And arachnophobia is definitely something that contributed to my fear of spiders. That movie, seeing that as a kid, terrified me. And to this day, I do not put on my shoes without looking. I like cereal boxes. I'm convinced there's going to be one in there. My shower head is going to come off one day and spiders are going to come out. So that movie definitely was a part of it. And so I think about that too, when I'm doing snake videos and things and sharing my snakes, that there's people that have that same fear for them, and that I want to put everything out there in a positive light. And I want to make sure that, you know, I'm A, being good for the hobby, and B, that even if these people are afraid, maybe it'll be enough to stroke a little curiosity and maybe let them see a side of these animals that they're not necessarily willing to see normally. And it has worked. Like, I have people in my life that, you know, through my Facebook page have now like, they'll send me messages like, you know, I used to have to like scroll by really fast when one of your feeds is up, but now like I appreciate how pretty they are. They still want to touch them, but at least like they can appreciate some aspect of it. And that's where it starts. To at least get somebody to appreciate that. Like, now they're not thinking like, I'll kill them all, you know, at least they understand.
And it's something to where, I mean, you know, firsthand that it's real, as far as I think a lot of times we're like, oh, it's irrational. So like, come on, get over it. Yeah. But like, you're still scared of spiders. You know,
I know it's irrational.
Irrational, right?
I absolutely know.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter. It feels like something baked in, I'm sure.
And I remember there's two great fears in my life, spiders and my mother. And I remember I was not allowed to go out the front door of our house to go to school because she wanted it deadbolted as well as, just locked. And I didn't have a key to that door. So I had to go out to the downstairs door. Well, one day there was a spider on the stairs, so I couldn't get downstairs. And I literally was late for school. I had to call somebody that happened to come and pick me up and take me in later. I had to wait till the spider moved because my fear was so great to go out the front door. And my fear was so great to go past the spider that I was just in like this impasse of what do I do? But I knew I had to get to school because if I didn't show up at school, she was going to kick my ass. So it was like, just wait. And finally the spider moved and I was able to get by it. But I mean, my fear was really bad when I was younger. I'm not that bad now. I had one in my mailbox. I think I told you about this earlier. I'm not sure. I might have been talking to somebody else, but I used a pair of pliers to get my mail for the whole summer because I don't want to kill it because, it's outside, it's in nature, it's where it belongs. But I also am not sticking my hand in that mailbox. No way, no how that thing's going to attack me and kill my family. So I use literal pliers, and that's how I got my mail for a whole summer.
See, I think I'm so biased. I'm like, oh, why are you scared of snakes if they're nothing? But I think the spider fear is so rational. But that's only because I have that fear.
Right. And you started a little bit afraid of snakes as well.
I did. But, okay, I don't want to say all snakes. I'm still scared of some snakes, 100%. And there's some snakes out there you should be scared of. Like, James even said he's not going to go mess with his white lip. You should be scared of that animal. But my corn snake that is, smaller than $1, I don't understand that. But then at the same time, the spider is smaller than the snake.
Yeah.
But it has 8
It's so different.
It's the way they move and so fast.
Yes. If they had one leg, I don't think it'd be
one leg, imagine it
just dragging itself around.
And it had a cane.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be as scared of it.
Yeah, like daddy long legs don't freak me out at all. I'll
Really?
pick those up, put them in my hand. They don't bother me. They don't really move fast.
It's
it's very deliberate.
They're like a mole or a birthmark with legs. They're so weird.
They scare me, but not as much as like.
It's funny too. I don't see those around as much. Like I remember growing up as a kid, they were everywhere.
That's a very, very good point.
And I don't really see them ever anymore. And I'm outside a lot.
Yeah, like you go to any window when you were a kid, there was going to be a daddy long.
Yeah, they were all over the house, all over your deck. You were playing outside. They're everywhere. And I couldn't tell you now that we're talking about, I don't remember the last time I saw one.
Hashtag
where are they now?
Man.
Yeah. What's going on?
That's scary though. There's literally like insects and stuff because no one really cares, but they're disappearing.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is going on? Probably all the nice chemicals we put in the air. This is going to get way too conspiracy theories here.
The chemtrails and all that. It's coming. But yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. And that stuff is kind of the base of the food chain. So you start messing with enough of that, you're going to affect everything. Yeah. Look at how much we depend on bees and snakes are a species in a lot of places that people don't realize how much we depend on them for things. Mm-hmm. You look at tick removal, possums and snakes are two of your best bets for that. You get rid of them. And
you're talking to the guy who's from Lyme, Connecticut.
Yeah, I am. And I have had Lyme disease.
The birth of the Lyme.
Yeah, I've definitely had Lyme disease. Almost every dog I've ever had has had Lyme disease at some point. It definitely happens there. Yeah, so tick removal is super important. And like I said, possums do a great job, but they did a study with, I think it was timber rattlesnakes. And it's like every adult timber takes like 2,000 to 4,000 ticks out of the population a year. Whoa. Just because they're eating, mammals that are feeding on them.
But what's crazy is that's not even an animal that eats a lot, Snakes have such a slow metabolism. They're only taking down, what if they take down 12 to 20 prey-items in a
yeah, you figure they must be loaded with ticks or something,
right.
Like it's very weird. And, I imagine that number is not necessarily inflated, but I would imagine that it's saying, well, if they're eating 200 and they can't reproduce, so there may be something to that factor in those numbers. But definitely, something we want around because I don't like ticks that much and I don't like getting Lyme disease. So. And now there's even worse diseases out there.
Dude, there's that one that makes you not allowed to eat meat in Texas.
Nope. That's like
one of my parents at my school in Dallas, she got that.
Nope.
They went hiking in Arkansas or something.
I like how you were going to say herping like a normal person would go herping.
It's whatever. Normal people don't.
And she got it, yeah. Now she can't eat meat.
Why are you outside if you're not herping? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, dude, like-
at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't go outside much during the summer. I am not a hot weather person.
But I mean, that's so scary. Imagine like one little thing that you can't really control or do anything about.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, like, congratulations, you're vegan. Like, you don't have a choice.
There you go. Yeah, that's
Then-
a lifestyle change, right?
Yeah. I can't imagine. I would definitely, that's one of those things that like I might have to consider just leaving. I don't think I could do it. I like my burgers. I like my steaks. I like fish. I like all that stuff. Like it's
They need to
time.
make assisted suicide legal
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
folks who can't eat meat anymore.
Exactly. It should be for sure. It's like those people that get allergic to alcohol, you know, it's no good.
Yeah, it's a rough life.
I'd rather. Some people maybe need to get allergic to alcohol.
Yeah, I would definitely rather lose alcohol than meat. I won't lie.
Yeah.
I don't drink very much these days, so I could deal with that. But if I couldn't go get a ribeye, that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm vegetarian. That's why I'm all of a sudden
Stop saying
so pale,
vegetarian.
and
You're vegan.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a difference. One's
I
extreme,
feel like-
one's mediocre.
No, I feel like once you claim vegan, you're on the team, and I don't want to be on the
yeah,
team.
you're there.
That I understand.
No, I just want to not eat meat and mind my business.
And not eat dairy. So vegan.
Yeah, but
Well, dairy's one of those things. Like I remember growing up, they pounded into us that like milk is so healthy for you, and then you get older and you learn like it's really not.
no.
And dairy's really not that great.
Yeah,
And
if you have too much of it.
what stinks is like I'm lactose, so it affects me. But like everything I love is dairy. I swear. Like ice cream is one of my favorite things. Like I love pizza. I love nachos. I love all this stuff. It's just cheese. So it's I suffer. I just don't care.
Yeah, see, I used to do that, and then once I got to a certain point, like the older I got, the worse it got.
Mhm.
And so I'm more of a vegan for the fact that I'm lactose intolerant more so than that I don't want to eat dairy. Probably eggs is what I would want to eat more so, and what I'm
But
trying to
eggs
eat a
don't
little
really
bit more.
affect you that much, which is
No.
weird.
I mean, that doesn't count. That's a different thing. But so yeah, how did we get to talk about
the
that?
cheese and the milk is what hurts.
Because of the ticks and then the snakes that remove the ticks. This is how these things work, you know. It's a good example of what happens when you go on YouTube too. You start one place and you end up somewhere
Bam.
totally different.
And it's funny because I feel like most of our ones that are done over the chat are very topic specific, very question and answer. But when I get someone in person, it's much more of a normal conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's good or bad.
I'm sure you'll
Jury's
find
out.
both answers from people.
I'm sure people will not hesitate to tell me.
The one thing that's guaranteed in life is you will never make everybody happy, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, I
Somebody
think
somewhere
that's-
will find something wrong with it.
But then why do we strive to do it? Like when we know it's not possible, I feel like we're still always trying.
Yeah, and we still get upset when people have those opinions, even though that we know that they're coming.
It depends for me. If somebody has a bad opinion of me that I respect, then that'll bother me a little bit. But if it's a person that I don't respect, I really don't care. Like there's some people out there that want to talk junk. I don't care. It doesn't affect me one iota. I'll laugh, I'll interact with it, but it's like when I go to bed at night, it's not staying with me. But somebody that I had tremendous respect for, if they were to, say, hey, what you're doing is stupid, then that would stick with me because that's a person I look up to. So if I don't look up to you, I don't care.
See, for me, it's like I probably too much want to be liked, or so it's hard for me that when someone like doesn't like what you're saying and you're trying to prove your point, and then I don't know, it upsets me more than I want to admit. So it's like I don't post on Facebook groups anymore because it's like even if I am trying to help someone, it's not going to end up. It's just going to end up me feeling shitty more.
So I'm not sure if Kyle's being sarcastic or serious
I
when
was
he's
always being sarcastic.
well, but he says, have you guys talked about Dan's sweet YouTube channel? But like he'll send me like great video all the time and stuff like that. Seriously, so he might really think it's sweet, or he might just be trying to shit talk me. I'm not sure yet.
Well, that's a great segue. Dan, talk about your YouTube channel.
He's so serious. He said, "No, I'm still not sure."
yeah, that sounds condescending. Maybe. I'm not
yeah.
sure.
So it's funny because everybody does the YouTube thing now, and for the longest time, I stayed away from it because I did not want to be another YouTuber or that type of thing. So I was just doing a lot of Facebook Live for a while. But Facebook now with the PETA thing involved has gotten like so anti our animals that content was getting removed. Even on my Instagram, they'll take down some of my snake posts sometimes. And it's like, I'm putting out content that's hopefully helpful to people. So I want to have that be able to be there. And so I figured YouTube was the safer bet, even though now YouTube's having its own set of issues and everything else. But I wanted to cover.
We made sure it's not safe for kids. When we filmed earlier.
Yeah.
We made certain.
Yeah.
Someone.
God, yeah. A certain someone.
Someone doesn't know how to control his
what you're talking about.
Yeah, just look around.
I don't know.
Who could it be?
Yeah.
But so I wanted to make some content, that wasn't out there in mass, talk about some subjects that maybe don't. And some people might find it a little boring because it's not
You aren't a 16-year-old girl.
That is definitely true. It's so funny looking at Instagram too for that, because you'll see like, an attractive chick post like a normal ball python and it'll have like 3,000 likes. And then you post this snake that like took 15 years for you to make and like you get like 7. Like,
yeah, it's even switched to the fact that like when I came up in snakes, like when I first got interested in the market and the industry of this whole thing, it's like you would have someone post a ball python and it would send like ripples across the whole community. And they'd be like, oh my God, you see that thing that person produced? And I feel like now it's like there's so much scattered attention everywhere. And it's like people seem to get more attention than animals these days. Even.
Yeah. And so my YouTube channel, I'm trying to do like an episode. And I also thought it'd be cool to do like meet the collection segments, which I've slacked on recently after my dog passed and getting my wisdom teeth out. It's just been like a kind of bunch of BS going on. And I haven't done as much as I should. But I thought that was cool to let people, just get like a 5-minute video, tell them a little bit more about the background of the animal, both from like a genetic side and, individual personality traits. Just let people kind of in on that window instead of just doing the whole room tour and this is that. Now you have a segment to really get to know the animals. And that's also why like I try to name all my snakes and I am way behind. But I find that people get a more personal collection or connection with your animal when it has a name, as stupid as that may be. And then they're looking for, I want that, Tux Incognito baby, or I want that Jackson Pitch or whatever it is. People are drawn to that animal and know that animal by name, and it gives them more of a recognition. And so now it's not just, oh, that's a really nice Sumatranus. Well, that's a, Jackson Pitch, or that's a Tux Incognito, or that's whatever.
And that works marketing. And then also it works for education, even throughout YouTube and stuff. People have that personal.
The biggest mistake I ever made was going into a classroom setting and I had a snake with me that did not have a name. And the kids asked me and I was like, oh no, I have to make up something on the fly. So my Burmese python for that day was named Bruce.
Bruce.
I just picked something that maybe the kids would be okay with.
Bruce.
I was thinking of the one from Finding Nemo.
Yeah,
so I figured that would work. Yeah. I figured I respected the berm where I didn't make him like, flower or something. I made him something cool. And
cool.
But it was something the kids could associate with. But yeah, definitely having a name for them definitely makes a difference, especially with kids. But it works for adults too. And we don't think that way, but in our mind, it just kind of overrides that.
I will remember a name more so than like, oh, that jungle pairing from that guy.
Right.
Cover girl to whatever.
And then also like when people are asking me like methods to tame their snakes or whatever that are defensive, it's funny because I'll have people talk to them and it has nothing to do with the snake, but when you're focused on talking, you're not focused on fear. And so people tend to, half the problem with defensive animals is you're afraid to get bit and the animal senses that and you're just reinforcing its need to be defensive. So I have people talk all the time. And I remember one friend of mine I told to do that and he was like singing the snake songs and stuff like that. And I didn't tell him for like 2 weeks why I was doing it. And then he's like, oh, so you're training me, not the animal. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I said, if your mind's focused elsewhere, you're not thinking like, oh, it's going to bite me. And then you're not making those movements that are causing the problem. So that works quite a bit. So it's amazing if we can trick our mind with certain things. And it's the same thing with marketing and everything else. But I just can't be that flashy pomp and circumstance person. It's just not who I am on any level.
Mhm.
So my YouTube channel is not like cool graphics and fast moving, and I don't do any editing or anything. I just shoot and go and upload, and one take, and you see what you see. But I also feel that's a more honest approach for the viewer, where the viewer knows you're not editing stuff out. If I make a mistake in saying something, I'll correct it and move on. And there's videos out there where I get mad because I made a mistake saying something and didn't catch it. And I'm like, and a lot of times it's stuff I know, but sometimes when you're under the pressure of like presenting it to someone else, you just kind of get into the wrong direction. Yeah. But I definitely hope people that are watching it are enjoying it. And I always get good feedback. I'm one of those people that gets like frustrated with how slow things build. Mm-hmm. And I want to just burst down walls and build. And not because I want like any ego out of it, but I feel like a lot of the information is good information that can help people, both new keeper to, more advanced. So I want that information to get out there, and I want people to see it, and I want to hear feedback. Even if it's negative, I would rather, fix things. Like the first 2 videos I shot, I had the phone up the other way, and so they look horrible.
You did vertical.
Yeah, I didn't know any better. So
yeah.
Somebody told me, I fixed it, and made all the difference. And you can see from watching it, it's a totally different watching experience. So it makes sense. So I'm always open to stuff like that. And that's something that, touches on another subject. Too many people in this hobby are too sensitive and not open to any criticism, constructive or otherwise. Like nobody wants to be told you're an idiot or anything like that. But sometimes you'll be so constructive with people and they get so offended, and it's like, I'm just trying to help you. Like, yeah, and then they're like, well, I don't need help. And it's like, maybe you don't realize you do, but you do.
But it's also hard in the internet's defense. It's hard if you post on a Facebook group and you're like, here's this animal, what do I do? There's like 15 people and you don't know who the qualified one is. So
right. And I actually did a YouTube video on that and how to interpret information from social media because it's such a prominent part of the hobby now. It's funny because, growing up on king snake and fawn and all these places, it's like the hobby's really on Facebook now, which is wild. There's still people that aren't on there, and there's a lot of the hobby that goes on that way. But the bulk of your market, the bulk of everything is on there. And that's the problem. Anybody can literally go start a Facebook group about reptiles and say that they're an expert, and what do you know? So I always tell people, when you're joining a group, it's good to sit back for a little while, observe and see and check information. Having a mentor is huge, but also it's hard to select a mentor because you don't know, who is right and who is wrong. It's definitely a tough time.
You don't always have the privilege of living in a place where there may be a local snake breeder or keeper.
Right. So, the person that probably mentored me the most wasn't local, but still, having that in my corner definitely helped me have a lot more success than I would have had without that. And it just helps because you'll see conflicting information and you don't know which is right. So it's nice to have that person to bounce that off of. And that's also something I touched on in that video, is like, when we've had snakes for a long time and we do get tired of the same questions over and over to some extent, like you have days where you're just not as patient. So it's more helpful if a person's coming to you with I did some research and found this versus this, and how do I interpret this into the right data, as opposed to just, I got a blood python, tell me how to keep it. Like that shows me that you don't want to put in any effort into that animal at all. And I'll go to the ends of the earth for people, especially customers, to help them with any question that I can. Even if I don't know it, I will research and try to find out that answer for you and try to, bounce ideas off of people and get you something. But it's definitely shows me a lot more initiative when you come to me with, I saw these people said keep them at 87. These people said 80. Where do you keep yours? As opposed to just, what do I do? Makes a big difference.
Yeah. Who were those when you were first getting into Borneos and short tails? I mean, who were the people that you initially looked up to?
Kara was definitely, I bought Sambuca and Tux were like, I initially bought a trio of Borneos. I shouldn't say initially, but when I got back in after, selling my whole collection, I started going heavy in like 2011. And that's when I decided like, I'm really going to go at this again. And I'm not going to back down and sell my collection. I'm going to work through whatever. And so I bought Tux and Sambuca from Kara, my Sumatran short tail, one of my pairs. And that opened up a door with her, and her and I became friends. And, even beyond just snakes, like she's somebody that I look up to for advice in life, and she's been very helpful in all that stuff. And a large part of my success I would attribute to that time that she invested. And she also just saw, how passionate I was for the animals and everything like that. And that kind of made her want to help me even more to succeed. And that's like I talked about in the beginning of this with the community aspect of short tails. People want you to succeed in that community, and they want to help you, especially if they see you're passionate and you're about the animals. We'll all go to the ends of the earth for those people that aren't just like, mistreating their animals or whatever else. If you really want to learn and you really want to be involved, like pretty much everybody in that community is great about that. There's a few people that are a little more reclusive and whatever else, and there's a few assholes like everybody. Every family has a few, but it's just few and far between there, and they're not the loudest voices, which is nice. But she's definitely up there. Obviously being close to Nerd and being able to go up there a lot, I've learned a lot of stuff from there too. Between Rob and Kevin and Jeremy and all these guys that are up there, and Emily and all these people that are keeping these other snakes. And the biggest mistake I think people make is they only want to learn from like certain people, but you can learn something from just about everybody. Even somebody that's been keeping for a year, they might have been through experience that you haven't. And you see some of these people that have kept and they kept well and they've never had a problem. So when a problem arises, they don't really know how to handle it, even though they've been keeping for 10 years. Whereas that, keeper that might've been keeping wrong went through this problem and learned the treatment process. So you might be able to learn something from their mistake. And so I think people miss that opportunity a lot. They only want to learn from like a Kevin or a Barczyk or these people that they think are, on this pedestal and deserve it to a certain extent. But you can learn just as much from other people too. And so it's been nice to have peers to bounce ideas off of. I really think that's probably the best part of that community, is just the willingness of everybody to take time, and, nobody's ever too busy for you. And they'll always, they want to learn from that, whatever you're talking about, and they want to help your animals as much as you want to help theirs. But definitely people like that.
And it seems like that is an area, as far as blood Borneos, short tails in general. It seems like an area to where you need to be at least a little educated to find out what you're looking for and what a quality animal is. I mean, there's plenty of that you see at shows, but almost none of them are going to be U.S. captain born and bred. So, I mean, what do you do looking for an animal?
It really depends on what species it is, first of all. Like each species I have different goals for on what I want to do. With my Sumatrans, I'm trying to go two different directions. So I'm trying to make really vibrant chromes, but that have really dark expression. And then with my darker stuff, I want like the blackest black that I can possibly get, like Nathan Explosion, blackest black time infinity type thing. But I also don't mind the whites that those snakes have on it. So I'm just trying to eliminate the brown from the equation. And I'm trying to do it earlier and earlier in the animal's life. So they all hatch out with some, but I'm starting to get to the point where some are having less and less. And then I'm trying to select those animals. It's really easy to get enamored with like the head color, because that's what sticks out. And my first like year of keeping holdbacks, I was like, oh, this one has a dark head, ignoring the pattern, the color on the body and everything. I was just enamored with that. Once I got over that and I started looking at subtleties in there, that's when I started getting better quality holdbacks and stuff that's going to make more sense for my long-term goal.
Sumatrans, the color phases are chrome, and then like the wild type is going to be black, right?
Well,
or
I mean, the wild type, Pumpkinhead is a separate locality.
Okay.
The orange heads are an isolated population, and there's a lot of talk that eventually those are going to have at least subspecies status, if not full species status. They're different behaviorally. They're different like size-wise and composition. Their egg, yield seems to be different. So
is that generally frowned upon to breed out, to breed pumpkinhead to chrome?
I would never do it, because I know there's such distinct localities, and I like the pureness of localities, because we've lost a lot of that over the time in the hobby. And eventually stuff's not going to get imported, and there's already things you can't get. Like Malaysian bloods basically don't really exist in the hobby anymore, at least not pure ones. Everybody crossed them with the Sumatran lines, not to be confused with Sumatran shorttails, but Sumatran blood pythons. Because
black bloods.
Yeah, no. Because Malaysia hasn't allowed export in I don't know how many years, but it's been like 20 years or something plus.
Whoa.
And so everything that's getting exported is coming from Sumatra. And So we've lost that bloodline because nobody bothered to keep it pure. Even though it's the same species, you're not making hybrids, you're still locality differences. We were talking about, the fuscus with, Queensland versus, New Guinea and that stuff. And I want to try to keep that separate even within that. So I'm definitely one of those people that likes to keep localities pure.
Mhm.
But the dark ones are selectively line bred. So they don't naturally, they naturally occur darker and lighter depending on whatever, but they're usually more of a brown, black, gray mix naturally. And some of them will have like a tan into brown head to dark black. So they're line bred to get that dark. And so selecting them is tough if you don't know the parents and grandparents. You're really taking a shot in the dark. Yes, you can make an educated guess once you've seen a lot of them, but realistically, you're really just rolling the dice. And bloods are the same way. Baby bloods, you could hold two side by side that look very similar, and in 3 years, this one's vibrant red and this one's dull brown still. And it all has to do with the lineage that's in there and what's behind it. And parents will give you an idea, and grandparents. So I don't like to roll the dice with imports unless you're in a situation where that's all that's available, or you're trying to bring in totally new blood to do something, or a new genetic. But as far as, when I'm going for color, I want established color to mix in there.
Are there any like legitimate, as far as I want to say normally inherited? I'm not sure how I want to put that, but are there basically any morphs in Sumatrans?
There is caramel albino, which I think is like a T positive albino in them, which I think is more often seen in the orange heads. I believe that it originated from that population.
What do they call that? Because I thought I saw it named something else when we saw it at Tinley.
That's a Borneo. You're thinking of the sunset Borneos or something?
Yes.
That's the T positive that was in Borneos, which for a long time nobody got into because they were convinced that it was from hybridization and not natural. That doesn't excite me that much. They're okay, but I like my Borneos how I have them. The side swipe stuff I really like a lot. So that the T positive in that hasn't lit my fire. It doesn't really in the Sumatrans either. I've never even considered getting involved in that. I also don't.
If you can get a black animal with those orange eyes, that's top notch.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, and I can't tell you how many times, and it's gotten to the point where, to be honest, like I just say okay and let it go with those because they're not hard sells. But when the actual truly dark babies come out, they have silver eyes. Even though they'll have orange later, they have silver eyes for the first few weeks. And so I'll post pictures of babies and people are like, no, I don't want that. I'm looking for an orange eyed one. I'm just like, okay. And the ones that hatch with orange eyes as babies usually don't get as dark. And so all these people are chasing something because they don't know. But if people have like an attitude about it, I don't even say anything. I just say, okay, good luck. Go buy one that you think is going to turn dark, and then you're going to be disappointed, whatever. But if people are decent, then I will, go on to that. Because if you look at my hatchling pictures versus like a month or two old, their eye color is totally different.
Dude, that's wild. Mm-hmm. How many Sumatrans or how many pairs do you have going in a typical season?
I like quality over quantity, so I don't like to do a lot. Not to mention, the market can only support so many animals. Fortunately, right now with the truly nice stuff, there's not enough people producing it, so the market's really good. But if you were to flood it, you're going to ruin that market.
And it seems like you also have some like ball python spillover now, I feel like, in some of the morphs, especially in red bloods.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot more people coming in, and just looking at like the Facebook group blood pythons, it's like doubled in size in the last year or two. And it's a mixed bag because
that's always that like double-edged sword.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time like showing people how wonderful they are, but then you get these people that come in and want to capitalize on that really aren't passionate about it.
I liked them before they were cool, damn it.
Yeah, and it's frustrating to see people overfeed them and to see people trying to baby factory them, and it's just not what they're built for. And
people who have put production ahead of the actual animal.
Right. And that's one of the things that I can also say about the blood and short tail community is the vast majority are about those animals. And those animals are their pets, their family, whatever you want to consider them. And they really want the best for them. And that was also part of the thing that attracted me to be a part of that was.
And no one got in it for the money at all. No. Like so many of blood and short tail guys are.
It's difficult to say because, you can make money breeding snakes. So to say that you can't is wrong,
Right.
but you really don't make substantial money ever. Like I don't have any money in my bank account. There's nothing. But my snake collection went from worth like, a couple $1,000s to worth maybe 30, 40, $50,000. So that's where I've made money. Like from time to time, it's nice. Like my car breaks down and I have money to fix my car,
or you always have animals to where you can put something up for sale and get that money.
Yeah. You have like an emergency fund when you need it.
Right.
But it's not like we're going to go on vacation 6 times a year and you're going to see me like in Cancun on a yacht. Like that's not the life I'm living. But it's not a lot of hobbies can pay you back. Most hobbies just drain your bank account. And this one can, and it will. But
you got to get past that hump though.
Yeah.
There's definitely
and then you have to be careful too. And when people first get in, they just buy everything they think is a good deal and they don't understand the concept of value, which is another topic I covered in a video where I try to explain to people that, the market might say this snake's worth 500 and it's perfect for what you need. And somebody's selling it for 800. I would rather buy that snake than go get one for $200. That's not going to get you to where you're going, even though that snake might also be worth $500 by the market. You're not really getting a good deal because you're tying up money, space, and resources into an animal that's not going to get you to your goal.
And I bet you saying even like, oh, I got this animal from Cara, that probably holds more weight than say, hey, I got this off the table at a reptile show.
Yeah, I don't remember from who.
This pairing is, blah, blah, blah.
There's definitely, and Bloods and Short Tails, like my target base for customers are those people that are selective and that want lineage stuff and that want stuff that's going to work. Even if it's just a pet, they want something that looks vibrant or looks nice. And then, personality is something I strive for too in my animals. I like my animals to be personable as much as you can get out of a snake. And so that's why I like using them for those videos and things, is it lets people see that you can get to that level with your animals. And I think I told you earlier, like I've never been bitten by one of my holdback animals ever, ever. And I've been bitten my fair share, but I've not by those animals that I've raised, that hatched in my house that have always been there. Like there's a comfort level and how I work with them. And like I said, I did a video on taming hatchlings. I don't believe in the flooding process, at least not for these species. It might be a little different with some of the colubrids where, they're not building that relationship with you on the same level.
You don't want to overdo it, I think, no matter what.
Right. But flooding with these guys, which is where you're just handling them over and over until they basically, their will breaks. I don't really think you're building a long-term relationship with an animal when you do it that way. You're not teaching them to trust you. You're just teaching them to give up. And so I like to leave them be when they're little and let them come to me and work on their level. And you don't have to handle all the time. I mean, some of my snakes outside of cleaning might not get handled for a month or two at times. It doesn't change their personality. They're still fine. I go and pick them up and shoot a video and they'll sit there for an hour with me and not care because I've put in that time and I've built that trust to where they know that I'm not a threat to them.
Right.
And you don't win them all. My ocelot is never going to be my friend. There's some snakes that are just hardwired that way. And those snakes are best left to be how they are. And I try to minimize my interactions and make it as positive as I can for both of us. And like my white lip female that she mentioned earlier, I've made a ship box for her. Ship box. She does shit in there sometimes, but I made a shift box for her because that's less stressful for her. Yes, it's less stressful for me, but it's more so for her because she's so manic that I'm worried she's going to injure herself. So if I can eliminate that risk, then I would rather do that. And so I think that's an important part of keeping is trying to make sure that you keep your animals on their terms and not force them into what you want out of them, or at least pick a species that, fits with what you want. I tell people that all the time.
Yeah.
Don't try to get a ball python and put it on display in your living room. Don't.
Yeah, you got to learn about the animal and
right.
And if you want a snake that can be held every day, I mean, there's almost no snakes that are like that, to be honest, unless that's a small period of time. And then, you also get the one where, well, I want to get a snake, but I don't want to get bit. Well, there's also none of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every snake can bite.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult.
I will say, and it'll sound biased because I breed them, but Sumatran shorttails I do think are like the best pet snake ever.
Dude, I had a Sumatran. It was
It's
just
amazing.
so chill.
Like they never take anything personal. You can do whatever you want with them. If you want a snake that you can sit on the couch for 2 hours and watch TV, they're totally cool with that. And obviously you have to put a little work in initially, but even as babies, they hatch out. They rarely ever bite. They eat great. Their food response is like psychotic though sometimes. So you have to definitely be careful there. But they seem smart enough to differentiate when they're eating versus when they're not. They are like as personable as snakes get. They seem very curious about us and what's going on. Husbandry wise, they're pretty forgiving as long as you keep proper ventilation. They're usually pretty good. If you don't keep them ventilated though, you'll kill them over time.
Really? And what are the signs of doing that, and kind of what are the measures you take?
Well, first of all, that's why I use tubs with them, because you can put ground level ventilation in and as much ventilation as you want. And they need humidity, and high humidity and low ventilation obviously is never really an ideal situation for other than growing mold. You know, I mean, that's what your goal is. You're in a science lab, sure. But so having that ground level ventilation really helps. And people get hung up on temperature and humidity, and temperature, humidity is husbandry and everything. And it's not everything. It's part of it. But definitely ventilation, I would say, is the first three most important things with those bloods and shorttails. You can make mistakes in husbandry with temperature and humidity and get away with it. You cannot make mistakes in ventilation and get away with it, at least not for very long. And you'll get the people that are like, well, my snake's in a tank and it's fine. And yeah, it's fine now. But when that snake gets older and it's breathing heavier and it goes to the bathroom and you're gone for 2 days, and now all of a sudden it's breathing that in and it can't get away from it, you're going to have problems, and you're going to see respiratory infections, and they just don't bounce back from respiratory infections like other species do. Like a ball, you get a respiratory infection in, you can kind of turn the heat up if it's minor and just handle that yourself. You don't necessarily need to go the antibiotic route, depending on, of course, what type of, you're dealing with and all that. But just as a basic statement, bloods and shorttails, though, even with antibiotics, like it's just hit or miss whether they come out of it. If you turn the heat up on them, usually it just makes them die faster. So you can't cook it out in that regard like you can do.
Are they kind of one of those species that have a ceiling as far as when they get too hot? Like they obviously like it pretty stable.
Yes. Absolutely. When they get too hot, they are evil, maniacal, terrible. 9 times out of 10, when somebody's like, oh, mine's so mean, you ask them what temperature they're keeping at, and they're keeping it too warm. I actually keep mine probably a lot cooler than a lot of people do. I have mine a lot of the time are in like the high 70s into like maybe 80, 81.
And that's a straight ambient temperature?
Yep.
No hot spot?
I do hot spots for gravid females, and then certain snakes that are in like that other room I told you about where I keep that room like 74. I'll use a hot spot in there. And I even played around recently because I wanted to see, what they did in like a cooler temperature. And I kept a couple for months in like the low 70s. No issues at all. I mean, healthy, everything the same as everybody else that was warmer. But when you overheat them, you could just see it all over them. They're totally different animals. Their personality is different. Their stress level is different. And stress just kind of opens up the immune system to all kinds of crap you don't want. So even my gravid females, I'll give them a hot spot of like 85, 86 when they're gravid, and that's all I do. You probably could get away with like a hot spot of like 88 when gravid. I just don't feel like going that high. I also feel like when you go up to the top end of anything, if you do have a temperature spike, you're so much closer to problems that I just don't like to take that risk. Most of my females use the hot spot at least some of the time when they're gravid. I've had a few that just don't go on it at all. And they'll sit in a certain position in their cage, wherever it is that they find that temperature they want, and they control what they want to do. But definitely once you get north of 84 degrees, and it depends, and there's literally a line where you just hit a certain line in the sand and that snake is done. And it will not tolerate anything. It'll get super moody. Some of them it's 85, some of them it's 86, some might go up to 87. But if you're doing a hot spot and you keep it around 83, 84, and they can retreat to a high 70s, low 80s, usually you won't have any problems.
Yeah, and Darren was asking in the chat, but are there any like physical ailments you'll be able to see pretty early if your ventilation isn't up to par?
It's one of those things that's kind of hard to describe. It's like you know what you're looking at when you see it kind of thing, but they're definitely, their scales will look a little bit rougher sometimes. They'll look a little bit different. You definitely see it. Like, I don't know if you've kept white lips before, but white lips are one of those species that like
Absolutely not.
they look night and day. If you let them go like a day without water, they will start to look like a corpse very quickly.
Well, olives will sometimes, if it's a little bit low humidity, they'll get
Yeah.
like a dry scale here and there,
Yep.
and you can tell by that.
Yeah, olives are like, a couple of steps down from the white lips as far as like, an olive a couple days without water is not a great idea, but they'll be okay. Like white lips, if you go too long, they're dead. Like they don't keep hydration as well. And maybe it's something to do with their skin composition, just lets out more moisture or something. And so if they're not keeping that constant level, then it doesn't work. Bloods and shorttails are forgiving to some extent. Like I said, the ventilation is the one thing that they're not. And the easiest way to do it is give them ground level, because they're super susceptible to like their own urates and stuff like that. And so if they're sitting in that, and the density of that, it'll stay in there and it keeps recycling through their system. And they're such heavy breathers that, it really affects them. So having that ground level ventilation allows that to get out, because in a perfect world, we'd be sitting there waiting for them to go to the bathroom and clean it. But that's not the world we live in. Like we have to work, we have to go away, have to do things. You get your arm broken. I had to take my wisdom teeth out. So I was down for like a day, things happen. So you want to have your enclosures kind of self-sufficient, at least for a couple of days at a time. And adding that ground level ventilation really helps with that. And so all of mine have it. And all of my tubs, if you go around and look, they all have holes, and don't go dead ground level, because they will flood their cage from time to time and you don't want that running out. But within like an inch of the bottom is usually a good place to go, and that's enough. But especially as they get larger, as babies, it's not as prevalent. But once they get adults and they're really big and they're really breathing into those big lungs and they're breathing heavy, you definitely want to have as much ventilation as you can while still maintaining decent humidity. They're forgiving. You can get them down to 50% humidity and it's not going to cause you a problem. I wouldn't keep it there long term. I keep hitting the cord.
You can move that if you want.
No, that's fine. But you've
only been in front of it for an hour now.
I try to keep mine like 60 to 70%, with the higher being when they're in a shed cycle. Just seems to help them. Being heavy bodied, sometimes they'll don't shed as easy as something like a carpet, for instance, or whatever, where it kind of just rolls off. Mm-hmm. They have that pronounced spine, and so it's kind of pointy there, and then they're heavy underneath. So it definitely helps to have the humidity, and hydration, of course, is key with everything.
And I know, like, when we've done shows with Matt and he has his short tails out, the babies he usually keeps on flooded. He keeps the slot in the acrylic display flooded, or else they'll seem to get like a more deflated, I guess, dehydrated look.
Yeah.
Are there any considerations just for keeping a baby normally? I mean,
well, it depends. Like, the reason he's doing that is those are probably babies that haven't shed yet. And to people that don't know, bloods and short tails take like 3 to 6 months to have their first shed. It's not like a lot of other pythons are usually 10 to 14 days and they're done.
And wait to feed them until they have their first shed.
Right. Whereas short tails, like 6 days out of the egg, will start eating. And so they're gonna have sometimes 15, 20 meals before they ever have a shed. So we usually keep them wet for that period of time. And you don't have to be sopping wet, but you just keep them damp. So I'll keep them on damp paper towels. And obviously they still have a water dish. And the first like week or two, I do keep like a 1/4 inch of water in the bottom of the tub. Sometimes short tails can be funny about seeking out water when they're babies. So it's easier if it's just everywhere and they can just drink. And once you get past that point, usually they're pretty good. And then once they have their first shed, you don't have to keep them wet anymore. And you can stop keeping them wet a little before their first shed sometimes, but it's not going to hurt them. They're not prone to scale rot. And I think a misconception that a lot of people have with scale rot is that it's just moisture, but usually it's filth and moisture that causes that problem. So it's sitting in, dirty urine, whatever you want to call it. I know it's not technically urine coming out of snakes, but
Urates.
Same idea. Yeah. Well, it's weird because like urates, I always picture the hard stuff, but these guys pass a lot of liquid.
I don't know.
My big T positive female, she probably lets go of a half a gallon at a time. Sometimes it's like a lot. And
dude, and it smells so bad.
it's
That's
strong. I'm used to it, so I don't think about it. But people are always like, "Oh my god, how do you deal
Matt
with that?"
had that
it.
adult
So
Borneo.
we shared a hotel room with Matt at Tinley,
Oh,
and you
man.
just walk in there and it just hits you.
I don't mind.
Imagine having 100 of them.
but yeah.
It was so strong. And
But
he
I'm
had
so
to,
used to it.
find the one that did it. You know, he had all of his stuff in the corner of the hotel.
Yeah.
Like dig through to find the one who it was, and that was. I think it was
Yep.
just one. I think it was only one of them who did
I
it.
think it was an adult.
But it was so. It was so bad. And she had he had to take her in the bathtub, right, to clean her all off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah.
Marita asked, after they do that first shed, is it 6 months again? Is it how long?
No, then it goes to a more normal shed cycle. I do think they shed a little bit less overall than some other species, but I just think it's everything slower with their system. But like anything else, they shed when they're growing. And so if you're feeding them too much, then they're probably going to shed more often than if you're not. I know I just had a ton shed because I gave them a month off without food for my subadult stuff, which I do usually once a year. I'll give them just some time to let their body completely reset, get everything out of their system. And so then I fed the last, 20 days, I fed twice. And so they all went into shed, and I had 19 snakes shedding at the same time. So that was a messy couple of days of cleaning there, where they all started shedding, because they like to go to the bathroom when they shed too a lot. They'll just let everything go at once. But yeah, they're interesting.
Is there any guideline to where certain age, from this age to that age, you feed this often and blah, blah, blah?
So another thing worth checking out on the YouTube channel is I did a video kind of on feeding snakes in general, more focused towards pythons, just because that's what I know. And by the way, so people know, my YouTube is Dan Magano Snakes, kept it simple. But I am one of those people that I don't believe in feeding on a set schedule. I believe, naturally, obviously, these snakes are opportunistic feeders. So they might eat twice in a week. They might not eat for 6 months. Their bodies.
They only eat Tuesdays at 4:30.
Right. Yeah. Snakes don't have a calendar. I always tell people that they don't know what's going on. So I like to feed based on body condition, age of the animal, sex of the animal, whether that animal's breeding that year, not breeding that year. I base it on just how they look. I just go in and I say, okay, this snake's sitting a little heavy. This snake's sitting a little light. We'll adjust. I like to vary my meal size, frequency, and type. So if I can, mix in birds, mix in guinea pigs, mix in rabbits, mix in rats, I like to do that. Birds I don't mix in as often as I should, because I hate how they smell coming out the other end. That's the one thing that I do for myself that I shouldn't be selfish with, but I am. But rabbits are a good lean meat, so I like to mix that in for sure. And also, like I said, I like to vary the frequency. So if I feed a medium rat to an adult, which can take much larger meal, then I might feed them again in 10 days. But if I feed them a rabbit, then I might wait a month. So I try to vary my time based on what I fed last.
That's a lot of record keeping, I feel.
Well,
or you don't.
I don't keep records at all.
I was like, how do you remember who you did a rabbit to?
But I just know, and it's really hard to explain, but I could go in, you could go through my room right now and ask me, when did the snake eat? What did it eat? Stuff like that. I know all in my head.
It's one of those things that works in collections, maybe our size, more so than, say, if you got on the commercial level.
Oh, yeah.
Where you gotta start messing around with actual record keeping, just because there's no way for you to remember all that information.
Dan, what did you say the YouTube channel?
I don't have any spaces, so maybe that's making the difference, and no S on the end of Magano.
You should probably go to youtube.com. Go in this. Okay. Sorry.
There you go.
Trying to help.
There's my page right there. So with younger snakes, you can get away with feeding a little bit more because they're growing so much. But once they get past a certain point, I start to slow them down. But that video gives a lot of information. Like I was telling you about that study on the Burmese pythons, it takes 14 days for that animal's body to recover from the time it starts eating. And so if we're feeding every week or every 2 weeks, we're never allowing that animal's body to reset. And so that's why I like to give them a month off without food. And I told people in that, some colubrids have super high metabolisms. That would probably be bad if it's not a brumation thing. But for the species that I keep and for pythons in general, you can do that a lot because they don't have, super high metabolisms. Boas, I think, would be the same thing. I would definitely give them time off. Breeding females, you don't have to think about it as much because they're going to naturally take a month or two off of food anyway. And I don't offer food once I see ovulation. I've only went once or twice where I got surprised where like a snake ate and then like a week later is sitting on eggs where I didn't realize she had ovulated and she wasn't showing. But they will eat if you let them sometimes. So I just try to eliminate that from the process.
Is that ovulation obvious, or is it something where you're like, this snake doesn't eat? This kind of makes sense time-wise. She probably ovulated.
So once again, in a perfect world, you'll catch ovulations most of the time, especially if you're checking your snakes daily. But ovulation, like it lasts over the course of a couple days, I guess, essentially. But there's really only like a 12 or 24-hour period where it's really obvious. And with larger snakes, sometimes it's harder to see because you don't see it as much. They could just be sitting in a different position. When you do catch an obvious one, it's super obvious. Like you get the whole swallow a football look.
Because they're already huge. I just wonder how much bigger they could get.
It depends on the snake. But like my big T positive, when she ovulated, like I thought it was an ovulation, but I was like, I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to take pictures from multiple angles, and pictures never show it the same as in person.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but like you take a picture of an ovulation that looks huge. See, when you look at the picture, it's like it really doesn't look like much. And it's really weird how that happens, whatever it is about.
You also gain an eye for what the animal usually looks like.
Yeah.
And then you're like, whoa, this is so much different, and someone may not see the same.
Behavior to me usually tells me more information than anything. I'm really in tune with all of my animals. I know all of their normal behavior. So any little thing that they do differently, like I'll notice right away. So even though I have 100 and something snakes, like I know this snake sits on this side of the cage this time of year always, and now she's on the other side of the cage, something's up. This snake, never wraps her bowl, now she's wrapping her bowl. This snake, is usually doesn't move for a month at a time, now she's restless. Like there's a lot of things that they'll tell you that their body's going through something, and if it's breeding season, then usually it's related to that. Like Lilith right now is one of my girls that's been breeding that I think is going to go very soon. Just behaviorally, the way she looked the other day, I actually put the mail in with her before I left, but I think she's already there. And it's just weird. You just know sometimes, just like I just opened her cage and I said, I think she's close. And there's nothing that I can give you definitively that'll tell you why. Yeah. I just know her and I just sense it with her. She wasn't as food reactive as normal. Normally she's one of those snakes that her head's right out and she's right there, and she wasn't that way. And like once I started feeding in the room, she was interested, but it took more to get her interest going, which tells me something's going on. And she's healthy or something like that. But
this is like the old student of the serpent thing, like these are the things that you can't teach, kind of.
No. And then, everybody wants to learn more about their snakes. This is the way to do it, the hands-on and learning. And if you do have somebody that breeds and you're getting into breeding, to have them to be able to be part of that process really, really helps, because you get to see those things. Mm-hmm. And like, there's certain things about breeding that like, I can't feel follicles. I'm one of those people, like no matter what, Agreed. I've never been able to feel follicles. It's like, oh, person, can you feel how loaded they are? No, I can't. I have like no feeling in my fingertips. I can't, but I can tell when she's building and when she's heavy just by her behavior and stuff like that. So there's other ways to do it, but it's super frustrating to not be able to do that.
Like it's the size of a pearl right now, this follicle.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't feel anything. Nothing.
But Joe sees things that I don't. Like,
corn snakes, it's easy.
See, no, not to me. He's all the time. He's like, "Oh, it's building. Can you see?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
Corn snakes have a flat belly, and then once they're building, they have a not flat belly, and it's pretty obvious.
Not. Can you stop saying that? I just
no.
It's not obvious to everyone. You see things that I do not see. It is not until it's like huge.
You'll get there this year. You'll be able to tell. It's your third year.
Getting my third eye.
I guess I don't think that's how that works, but okay.
I feel like it is like a third eye. It's like you're seeing things my eyes will literally do not see. Like I can't find it. I can't pick up on whatever it is you're noticing.
Oh, and I've seen that in people where I'm like, look at this obvious ovulation. They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, look how big that snake is right there. And they're like, I don't see it.
Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm like, look at it. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how that is and how perceptive you get, especially if you spend a lot of time with them. And that's why, like I say, building those working relationships with your animals makes all the difference, because everything happens slowly in pythons, and like even illness, Like if you're in tune with your animals, you might notice something's off before there's really any symptoms to go off of. You might already have an inkling like something's not quite right with this animal. Its personality's off. Why? And then you can start trying to eliminate, different things and figure it out from there. And sometimes that'll be the difference in life or death if you can pick up on something early on versus, oh, well, now its mouth is open and it's breathing funny and stuff like that. So it's definitely, I like to spend a lot of time with them and not just cleaning and all this stuff. I take my snakes outside during the summer and I like to get them into different situations. I do educational programs. I like to see how they are with groups of people. And obviously I don't bring a snake to an educational program that I haven't seen with a controlled group of people before. Right. But that's why I like bringing them outside, having a few friends over, seeing how the snake is, because in my snake room, a snake can be one way and then all of a sudden we're out somewhere else and now there's 5 people around and it's freaking out. So you have to know how that animal is going to handle each different situation. And I think the more confidence and trust your animal has in you, the more in turn that it, is open to new situations. Same thing with husbandry. I always tell people the more comfortable your animal is in its enclosure is going to make it more comfortable everywhere. Because now, like, at least it has somewhere it knows it's going to go to and unwind and relax and feel safe. If your snake's stressed out in its enclosure, everything's stressful. Like it doesn't ever get a break. It's just constantly in a state of stress.
Yeah, just like a human. Imagine you're going to be an irritable person no matter where you are.
Right. What are you trying to say?
I know a few people.
Yeah.
So Dan, like, what do you feel is the future of your breeding? What are some things that you're looking forward to in the future?
Just a lot of my holdback stuff is coming to age now and starting to breed for the first time. And then I've got holdbacks on the horizon. I just like to see where stuff goes and where you can take certain projects. And even within my collection, I have like separate segregated projects within a species that I like won't mix, even though, it's the same species. Like I have sideswipe stuff and super stripe stuff. It looks very similar. Some people think that it's the same gene. I don't, just based on how the genes interact with other genes. Like I've seen super stripe stuff go into granite and marble and react one way, whereas sideswipe reacts a different way, and it manifests itself very different visually. So if the genes are interacting like that differently, it kind of makes me feel like there definitely is some difference there, even though they look, similar. Like Matt has a super stripe that looks almost identical to one of my sideswipes, but every single thing that I can see with marble and granite into sideswipe, you really don't see the marble and granite. It's like hidden. Even if it's there, you can't see it visually. Whereas I've seen a lot of super stripe stuff where you can see both visually. So that to me tells me maybe there's something different. So I like having both of those, and I want to work with both those lines separately.
Also, those genetics are so hard to pin down as it is, no matter what you're talking about.
Borneo genetics, like the more you learn, the less you know.
That's what I'm like, Matt, I think you probably know the most. So what is this? He's like,
I don't know.
No.
Like, and then you'll hatch something out, and selling Borneos is super difficult because everybody wants that ball python. This is a pied. This is a pastel. Yeah. And it just doesn't work like that. There's polygenics going on. You can do the same pairing 3 times and get 3 totally different clutches of different results. And it's kind of maddening. It makes you a little crazy because you get a snake you really like and you're trying to make another one and then you can't. Or you get nothing from the first pairing and then you do it again and you're like, wow, like this is incredible. So Borneos are probably my favorite thing to breed because of that. Because when those eggs start hatching, I don't know what's coming out. I have an educated guess, but every year it's like it could be anything.
It's also odd how it seems like Sumatrans and red bloods don't seem to be nearly as polygenic.
No, not at all.
Or like, and they have genes that are much more conclusive, or the red bloods have genes that are pretty.
Yeah, I mean, GoldenEye, right? Magma, all that stuff is like pretty cut and dry. There's a few things in bloods that are still a little, work in levels and work in different ways. But even some of the Borneo genes that are like sort of recessive also can work in other ways. And like,
yeah, it's recessive, but this one time I had shut out the first time.
like ultra's a really funky gene in Borneos, and it does a lot of weird stuff. So you could breed an ultra animal to, a ghost animal, and it can interact and it can work together, or it can't, one time. And then, You can get ultras from ultras, and then you get like these funky looking babies that look definitely visually different than a normal. They're not quite ultra. And then you get different levels of ultra within that. So you could have 3 ultras that look totally different, don't look anything alike. So it works like that with a lot of Borneo genetics. So when you're trying to sell it to people, sometimes it's frustrating for them. And so it's a lot easier when you're selling it to just say, this is from Sideswipe Ultra to Ultra, or this is Blue Ghost to Sideswipe, or Super Stripe to this. There's some that you can definitively say this is what this is, but not all of them work that way. Like Sideswipe is easy. It's either Sideswipe or it's not. That one's easy. But we don't even know the extent of Sideswipe at this point, whether it's incomplete dominant or whether there's something, it's just dominant. So that's something that I have to work on eventually. And I was supposed to really work on that, but I've gotten so distracted elsewhere that I've been putting my Sideswipe stuff into Blue Ghost, and then, I'm putting it into this line. I have not done a Sideswipe to Sideswipe.
Sometimes it's more fun to create new things, I suppose.
And at some point I have to go back and get that hard road traveled. Like I have a female right now, a Sideswipe female that's ready. And I have another probably 2 next year that'll be ready. So I'll really start mixing more stuff in there now and really figuring out that Sideswipe stuff. But realistically, it could be years and years before I actually figure it out. Because if it's not visually different, then you have to hold back every single Sideswipe and figure out which one is producing all swipes, which one's not. If you can't find, there's no way to know, and you can't do it one time.
In corn snakes, we have animals that are dominant or incomplete dominant, but have super forms that will create, all of their phenotypes. So say there could be a super Sideswipe that produces all Sideswipes.
Right. Well, but
you can't tell phenotypically the difference.
Right. So we don't know if that's the case or not. And the reason that I went after that female, she's not one that I produced. She was from a Sideswipe to Sideswipe pairing. So even though who knows, whatever, at least it's a better starting point than, my stuff that's Sideswipe to not. So I could breed her and all Sideswipes could come out, and then we go, okay, maybe it is. And you do it again and see what happens. So that's part of the reason that I haven't put a Sideswipe male to her yet, because I want to get that first clutch from something else and just see what happens. Have a starting point.
Got to get that wild type.
Yeah.
Is there such thing as a wild type Borneo?
Oh yeah.
I feel like I just never seen them because
you don't see them as often anymore. Yeah, no, Matt, everything Matt has is crazy. He's like a mad scientist. He's got all kinds of stuff going on in there, which is why I have so many animals from him, because they add a lot of depth to a lot of projects that I have. And I'm really looking forward to. I have a pair of orange head stuff from him that's smoking, and they should be ready next year, I'm hoping. And I'm really looking forward to pairing that up, because I want super, super orange head stuff. And I want to try to eventually work that into some of my lineage stuff and see if I can get that visual Sideswipe with a super orange head. But it's weird. You never know. Certain genes kind of block out other genes and they don't play nice. And so you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely something to the fact that Matt's been so focused for a certain amount of time, in which has made it super advantageous, and he's gotten so far in Borneos, and it's amazing.
Oh yeah.
But Deadly Tarantula Girl asks, do short-tailed pythons dull down when they get bigger, or do they keep their juvenile coloration bright and beautiful?
Typically, and that's all lineage based, and that's why it's so important to know the parents of the animals that you're getting and the grandparents of the animals, because like I said, you can have those 2 bloods together as babies that are both brown, and one's going to be vibrant red and the other's going to stay brown. And that's all going to be based on lineage. And it is a bit of a crapshoot. Even from nice lineage, you're going to have different levels of how nice that animal is. And that's why, Martyr line bloods, for instance, Kevin Martyr there, he put in the work for a long time, and his consistently throw nice animals. So they don't look like much as babies, but you give those animals 2 to 3 years and they look amazing. And then even as adults, they continue to change a little bit over time. They don't dull down per se as they get older, at least in bloods, but they'll get a deeper red a lot of times. So an older animal might be a lot darker red. But overall, good lineage gets better. So, I know it's frustrating with ball pythons. You see this beautiful baby ball python, and then it hits adulthood, and you're like, yeah, it lost a lot of that visual appeal that you had.
Yeah.
Which is why pieds are nice, because they always look nice. They don't lose that appeal. But pastel, some baby pastels come out highlighter yellow, and then they're brown in 3 years, and that's depressing, Borneos probably stay somewhat more consistent. They definitely change. I have some that look totally different now than they did as babies. And I try to share that once in a while. I'll share pictures on my Instagram where it's, this is 3 years ago, this is now, so people can see. Because when you see it every day or constantly, you don't really notice it so much as seeing, here's this baby when it was, 5 minutes old versus, 3 years old now. Sumatran short tails, once again, quality lineage, get much, much darker if they're darker. Chrome, I haven't really cracked the code on that one yet. It's funny because I've made some really nice chrome animals, but I tend to hold back the wrong ones. And so I'll watch somebody else's that I sold look amazing, and mine's like, yeah. So I haven't quite figured that out. I'm still trying to iron that out. This year, I think I did a lot better. We'll see. Time will tell. But I think once again, when I was talking earlier, getting enamored with the head color, I got caught up in that instead of looking at the body. And this year I went by the body more. So we'll see if I do better in that regard. But overall, you can expect bloods and short tails from good lineage to get better with age.
Cool. And if someone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
I'm on Facebook. If you just look up Dan Magano, I am on there, but it says alt on it because that's my when I'm in Facebook jail account. I changed
Classic.
my name on there as a joke, so it's under Danich Magano. So that one's possible to get a hold of me. I'm on Instagram as The Real Magano, and then YouTube, I guess. I don't even know. Can people message you on YouTube? I don't even know.
But go watch his videos and subscribe to his channel.
Definitely check out the YouTube channel. I think, let me know what you think. I think there's a lot of good information on there, especially as I got later and a little bit more comfortable with the platform. I started tackling some stuff and enrichment and all these different subjects. And I like to look at stuff from like a no BS approach. And my opinion's in there on a lot of stuff, but I'll tell you when it's opinion versus fact. And so I think that it's worth checking out for people if you're interested in learning a little bit. And I'm open to ideas for future videos too. We shot a video today that's probably not going to get uploaded tonight because by the time I get home, it's going to take a million hours to upload. We'll see.
But yeah, we filmed the video a little bit about colubrids, brumation, all that good stuff. We went off on some tangents as well, I think. So there's plenty of stuff in there. But as far as us, Port City Pythons, PortCityPythons.com, Port City Pythons on Instagram, Port City Pet YouTube channel.
We promised you guys a video tomorrow, so Joe has a late night ahead of him.
Yeah. MLK Day Marathon. Well, I don't know if I have to work tomorrow or not.
Oh, I have to. Know. Is it Martin Luther King Day tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize. Holy crap. I'm still thinking it's like the 13th. I didn't realize how far into the month we are.
I don't know how that works for you.
I don't know. I never get told when to work and when not to work.
Oh, really?
It's very odd.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like, I've worked through certain holidays. I'm not even sure.
We get a floating holiday for that. So our company recognizes that as a holiday, but we still go to work. But it gives us a day off that we can use some other time as a paid day off. Yeah,
that's nice.
So like Patriot Day, we get one of those. And
I've never even heard of that.
Our company's based in Massachusetts.
Oh, so is that Mass?
So no, I mean Patriot Day is I think 9/11, if I'm not mistaken. It's for that.
That was a thing.
Yeah, so we still work that day, but we get a floating holiday for that. I think they take it off in Massachusetts, but we don't down here in Connecticut. They bought our existing locations out, so we kind of operate a little bit differently than they do. But yeah, I'm all about floating holidays.
Yeah.
Well, you will see a video soon on Dan's page with us in it. And then we have our first Port City Pet video.
Oh, snap.
That will be there by tomorrow.
She's giving me those eyes like, you better get it done. Now that we said it, you need to get it done.
You'll either see that video or Joe's body. One or the other.
Rest in peace. No more videos.
But other than that, you can find us on Instagram, Port City Pythons. Oh, you already said it.
Yeah, I already went through this. We just suck at ending things. That's how it goes.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, Dan, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Special Sunday podcast.
Yeah.
It was great.
Peace.